Choose some of the data from the chart and organize the data you've chosen into a matrix. Explain your choices and how you organize the categories, including any rounding. Identify the dimensions of the matrix you have constructed. Alright, so we have this box office comparison for all-time top grossing films. So we need to pick some of the information from this table, and then we can put that into a matrix. So basically we just need to pick categories for our rows. It can be however many rows we want, and then categories for our columns in our matrix. Why don't we just pick a few movies here for our categories of rows? So we can pick Titanic, Avatar, and why don't we pick Star Wars? And then within those categories, we have many numbers to choose from. And these will also be our columns. And so we can just pick a couple of these columns to give us information about the grossing films. So why don't we pick as our columns production budget and worldwide box office? So using those different categories that we picked, then we could make a matrix. And based on what categories we picked here, we would have a 3 rows by 2 column matrix because rows come before columns. And then since these are such big numbers, why don't we go ahead and round these to the nearest million? And so if we want our first category to be Titanic for our first row, then we would have in our first column and first row, so 1, 1, then we'd have 200 million. And so we can just round that as 200. And then for our other Titanic category, for the second column, then we would have, this is in billions, and rounding that to millions would be 2,208, since 6 is the next number. We'd have 2,208. And again, that's just looking at the 7 here. It's going to round up. Let's go ahead and look at these other ones to see how they will round. So we see at the next one, that's also going to round to a 4 to get it in millions because it has a 9 after this 3. And then our last one with Star Wars is also going to round up to a 1 since we have the 7 right next to it. And so going on, looking at Avatar, then our production budget is 425 million. So that's going to go in our first column. And then in the second column, 2,784. And remember, we don't need the currency signs. We also don't need to label our categories. And then for Star Wars, then we'll have 200 million in our first column for the production budget. And then in our second column, 1,511, rounding up there. And so we just used a few of the rows and 2 of the columns in our table, and we put this into a matrix that represents that information. And this is just one example. You could add in other columns, other rows, and you'd still have a valid matrix. So let's go ahead and summarize our answer. Answers will vary. A possible choice might be using the production budget and worldwide box office earnings, rounded to the nearest million for the column categories, and 3 films, Titanic, Avatar, and Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens for the row categories. This is a 3 by 2 matrix. 200, 425, 200, 2,208, 2,784, 1,511.